Too many mornings I awoke to the sound of hatred. I'd sleep peacefully until the obnoxious sounds of RTLM drifted through my dorm window and into my dreams. You see, in my third year at university, RTLM became the new, ultra-popular radio station among extremist Hutus. It was little more than a radical hate machine, spewing out anti-Tutsi venom. It was always some voice, calling for Hutu power, the catchphrase for Hutus to rise up against their Tutsi friends and neighbors. These Tutsi cockroaches are out to kill us. Do not trust them. We Hutus must act first. They are planning to take over our government and persecute us. If anything happens to our president, then we must exterminate all the Tutsis right away. Every Hutu must join together to rid Rwanda of these Tutsi cockroaches. Hutu power! Hutu power! It was an awful way to wake up, but the broadcasts were so ridiculously juvenile that they were almost funny. It was hard to believe that anyone could take the infantile insults and outlandish threats seriously. Still, it was unsettling to know that the government was allowing Tutsis to be openly threatened over the public airwaves. But at the time, I was more disturbed by rumors that Tutsis were being murdered by extremists in several areas of the country. Okay, so now Immaculée is home for spring break. So she's in college, but now she's home for spring break. My eyes were shut for what only seemed like minutes when the door of my room burst open. I sat up with a start and noticed that it was dawn. I could see Damascene's terrified face in the gray half-light of my bedroom, and I imagined the worst. "What is it, Damascene? Are the killers here?" I could barely hear my own frightened voice. My brother said nothing. I could hear him trying to catch his breath while he stood in the doorway. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded like it was coming to me from the bottom of a deep well. "Get up, Immaculée. For heaven's sake, get up. The president is dead." "What? What do you mean the president is dead?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The president had promised to bring peace and equality back to Rwanda. How could he be dead? "I mean, President Habyarimana is dead. He was killed last night. His plane was shot out of the sky." I thought of what I'd heard on the radio a few days before. If anything happens to our president, then all Tutsis must be exterminated. I jumped out of bed and searched frantically for something to wear. I pulled on a pair of jeans under my long green nightdress. I pushed the curtains away from my bedroom window and looked outside. I'm not sure if it was my imagination, but I saw a sickly yellow haze settling over the village. "Even the sky is changing," I said, dropping onto the bed and holding my head in my hands. "Oh, Damascene, we are all going to die. They will come for us now, and they'll kill us for sure." My brother sat down and put his arms around me. "Listen to me, Immaculée. We are not going to die. We had nothing to do with this. The president was flying back from peace talks in Tanzania, and he was traveling with the president of Burundi. The plane was shot down when it was landing in Kigali. In Kigali! No one will be blaming us down here." Damascene was trying to be brave for me, but he was a poor actor. I know that he was trying to convince himself as much as me. "Maybe things will improve for us now that he's dead. So many people were against these peace negotiations and President Habyarimana's plans for a more moderate government that his death may actually ease the tensions. Don't be so frightened, Immaculée. Come outside. Everyone is out there listening to the radio." He took me by the hand, and we went out into the yard where my parents, my cousins had settled in to listen to the radio. The announcer reported that roadblocks and military checkpoints had been set up all over the capital, minutes after the president's plane had been blown up. He also said that at least 20 Tutsi families in Kigali had been killed during the night. I hesitate to use the word reported because the man on the radio sounded more like a cheerleader for the killers than a journalist. When he announced that Presidential Guard soldiers had taken upon themselves to kill Tutsis to avenge the president's death, he made the killing sound justified. He made it sound like dragging entire families into the street and murdering them was perfectly reasonable. Then he read out some of the names of the people that the soldiers had killed so far in Kigali. The fifth name belonged to my uncle Twaza. "They've killed Twaza?" my mother cried out, quickly covering her eyes with her hands and shaking her head in disbelief. "Why would they kill Twaza? He's never harmed anyone." A painful silence enveloped my family as we realized that we'd missed our opportunity to escape the night before. My father tried again to ease our fears. Emotions are running very high in the capital. That's where the killings are because that's where most of the soldiers are based. Everything will settle down in a day or two. You'll see. I think I'd like to go home now, said Augustine, whose family lived in Kigali. We looked at him, knowing that it was far too dangerous to go anywhere. A few minutes later, our suspicions were confirmed in a series of radio announcements. Stay in your homes. It is forbidden to travel. Only military personnel will be allowed in the streets. Do not go outside. Public transportation has been suspended. Do not leave your homes. They want us to stay put so they'll know where to find us. They want us to be sitting ducks, Damascene exclaimed. If our names are on their death list, then they'll know where we live, and they know we will be here. It was the morning of April 7th, 1994. We didn't know it yet, but the genocide had begun. Mom, Dad, Damascene, and my cousins and I spent the entire day huddled together in our yard listening to the radio. The broadcast from outside of Rwanda reported that ordinary Hutu citizens were joining government soldiers and Interahamwe militiamen in killing innocent Tutsi civilians. Meanwhile, the local stations were encouraging Hutus to pick up machetes and attack their Tutsi neighbors. The only encouraging news we heard all day was a message from the RPF's Paul Kagame, who was in charge of the Tutsi rebel soldiers based in Uganda. He promised that if the killing of Tutsis didn't stop, the rebels would invade Rwanda and fight to the death to protect their fellow Tutsis. It was comforting to hear Kagame say that, but I was saddened that the only good news was the threat of all-out war. None of us slept more than a few minutes that night. The next day we listened to a BBC phone interview with Rwanda's Prime Minister, a moderate Hutu living in Kigali. Even though United Nations peacekeepers were guarding her, there was gunfire all around her home. She said that she, her husband, and their 5 children were lying on the floor and had no way to escape. During the interview, the phone line went dead. We learned later that soldiers had burst into her home and shot both her and her husband. Luckily, her children had been rescued. The Prime Minister's words affected us deeply, and it was now impossible to pretend that things were going to get better. If killers could execute the Hutu Prime Minister, what would stop them from murdering us? The constant tension during those 24 hours took a toll on my family. My mother went into a kind of trance and began moving from room to room, packing every suitcase we owned with whatever she could lay her hands on. I'm not going to leave the things I've worked so hard for so that people can steal them. I'm going to hide them away, she said. One day we'll come back for them. I didn't know where she was planning to go. We just heard over the radio that our only practical escape route across Lake Kivu had been cut off by the Interahamwe militia. They were murdering every Tutsi or moderate Hutu who approached the lake. My father remained in bewildered denial. If the killing continues, the RPF will step in to stop it, he reasoned. They could be here in Mataba to protect us in a few days. What are you thinking? I asked him. The RPF soldiers are up north, near the Ugandan border. They have no vehicles. They're on foot and will have to fight the army in Interahamwe every step of the way. It will take weeks for them to get here, if they get here at all. My parents weren't thinking clearly. I'd followed Damascene's lead my entire life, but now he'd retreated to his room and was staring at the walls. Do you honestly think we're going to escape this? He asked when I came to find him. I'm lying here trying to picture what I'll be doing next year, but I can't. I don't think I'll be alive. I have no future. Damascene, you have to snap out of this. You can't give up before we even start to fight. If you can't see what you'll be doing next year, I can. You'll be with me in Butare when I graduate university. You're going to be sitting in the front row clapping and cheering when I accept my diploma. So please get up and help Mom and Dad. I wish I had your faith and courage, Immaculée. I didn't feel courageous, but someone had to pull my family together. I tried to be strong and at least act brave so that the family wouldn't collapse in complete despair. By nightfall, we'd heard that the 10 Belgian UN peacekeepers protecting the Prime Minister had been murdered by government soldiers and that the lives of all the other Belgians in Rwanda were being threatened. We knew that if the Belgians and other foreigners left the country, there would be no one capable of stopping an all-out slaughter. For the second night in a row, none of us slept. At dawn, the screaming began. 24 Interahamwe militiamen attacked our village, tossing grenades into houses. When the families inside tried to escape, they were hacked to death with machetes. When my family heard the screams, we opened our gate and ran out to the road. We could see for quite a distance from our hilltop home and searched for the source of the commotion. Below us, on the far side of a nearby river, we saw a group of Interahamwe surrounding one of our neighbors. They moved like a pack of jackals, holding their machetes above their heads and circling him slowly. We watched helplessly from afar as they moved in for the kill, mercilessly chopping him to bits. We turned away from the murder in horror. Coming toward us quickly from the other side of the hill were dozens of our Tutsi neighbors. The men were carrying sticks and stones to protect their families, while the women carried their babies in their arms and yelled at their older kids not to fall behind. "Leonard," they called when they saw my father, "please help us. They're killing us. What will we do? Where should we go?" Since my father was one of the most respected men in the village, within a few hours approximately 2,000 men, women, and children were camped out in front of our house, looking to him for guidance. I couldn't believe how many people had been driven from their homes. Scores of families sat around cooking fires, arguing about what to do next, while their children played games and chased each other through the fields. If it hadn't been for the occasional gunfire and grenades exploding in the distance, the gathering could easily have been mistaken for a family picnic. The number of people who had come seeking my father's help and advice seemed to bring him back to reality. He became more like himself and took action. "Everyone be calm," he said. "We'll find a way to get through this together."